Well, that long, awkward pause from me to intro the show, that if you're listening to just the audio portion, my eyes were about as big as ping pong balls there because the Bengals gritted. John, despite their very best efforts to make your streak and prediction come true, the football gods have decided to smile upon the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony. He is John. And this show is part of the Believe, BLEAV podcast network. And we are brought to you by FanDuel. So hopefully you guys checked out FanDuel and won yourself some dough yesterday. And it is also brought to you by FOCO, the fans only company. Go get some exclusive Bengals merch that is available on that website. Go do that. We have both of those linked in our show description. But all of that being said, John, have you collected yourself after yesterday? Have you been brought back to reality? I don't know. I don't know what the phrase is here.
No, you know what? I actually did officially predict the team would win on A to Z Sports in an article form. And the first line was, I know that they're going to make me regret this. And they damn sure tried because I think thematically, Anthony, there was only two ways that this game would have gone. They were either going to win exactly like they did, or they were going to lose, but look promising in doing so. And we would talk about, is it a fast start if they win but stink? But also, is it also a fast start if they look a lot better than they did in previous years, but they still lose, right? It was never going to be a blowout victory. This probably wasn't going to be a blowout loss. It was going to be one of these two. And I think everybody in Cincinnati, all the way down to Orange County where you are, would prefer this outcome over the alternative. So that's where we are.
Yes. And we are going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the defensive performance. We are going to talk about some offensive line news. We're going to talk about how we feel about this start, because week 1's always weird. And we know division games are always tough. Road division games are tough. And of course, the team came out victorious regardless of how it looked, what they did or didn't do. And it was ugly. Before we get into everything, just want to remind folks to get the Believe in Cincy podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer. Leave us a review if you can. And we appreciate the feedback. You can get our show and a number of others on that channel. We'll be bringing you content pretty much all throughout the week, leading up to game days and after game days. I did stumble, guys. I'm sorry. I was set to do a post-game show yesterday. I had a friend in from Massachusetts out of town. He was only here for a day or two. So I had to carve out some time for my buddy. But he did get to watch a little bit of the game with me. And then he came back a little later in the afternoon, evening. So it prohibited me, for good reason, from doing a post-game show. But we're going to try and do those regularly as well, immediately following games or later in the afternoons following games, that sort of thing. But this one is also going to be a staple of ours, the aftermath, as we've come to call it. And but both John and I kind of take a look at things after we've had about 24 hours to digest, which is we've now had about 26 hours, I think, to digest this thing as we sit here live. So, look, it's been said probably on 800 other shows at this point, a win is a win. You're in the win column, despite how it looked, but there were problems along the way. There is no doubt about that. The Bengals came out charging, John. They came out charging, and that first drive was masterful. And I say that in a number of different senses because you and I talked about on a recent show, might the game plan be a little bit more methodical, control the ball, keep their own defense off the field until they get their footing. And it seemed that way initially. And then, of course, the defense came and saved the day later in the game. But the bounces that the Bengals did not get last year, the good fortune that the Bengals did not get last year showed up in this game. Now you can belittle it by saying, well, it's a 40-year-old Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns are kind of finding themselves as well. Of course, but it's the NFL. It's a road divisional game. The Bengals did, and when I say just enough, I mean just enough to come out with this win here. And they start 1-0 for the first time under Zach Taylor since 2021.
Just enough, literally just being by a point, right? And I think that when we talked about like how this game was going to be won, right? Joe Burrow said it best, and we kind of really saw it with his play. The ball needs to get out quickly because before long, number 95 for brown and orange is going to show up. And that was the case in the second half. And we saw in the first half, those first two scoring drives, Burrow's under center, play action. He was in the pistol, leaning on Chase Brown, trying to find those underneath routes, particularly to Noah Fant. We could talk about him in a little bit. They had a good plan to start the game out. And It was clear that the offensive line was in sync. They were generating movement. That was another big question of mine. Chase Brown really in form in those first couple of possessions. And Burrow didn't look as sped up as he has been in recent years in week 1 and 2. And it seemed like the reps that he was getting in the offseason and training camp preseason, it was paying off. But it was still a very specific plan against this defense that majors and man coverage with Jim Schwartz calling the plays, that has multiple guys outside of Myles Garrett who can win in one-on-one situations, to not be in true dropback situations, to try to stay ahead of the chains. That is what they set out to do. And that is what they did for basically the majority of the first half, while the defense was kind of reeling in, closing in on some of those in-breaking routes, those drag routes, those over routes to Cedric Tillman, to Jerry Jeudy, to Harold Fannin Jr., of course, a rookie tight end, goes off against the Bengals, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it seemed like the Bengals offense had a really good plan against a defense that they had struggled with, but unfortunately, things all changed in the second half. And I think that's where we can get to the concerns in a little bit. But my initial impression was that they knew what they had to do against this Browns defense. And when it came time to adjust, it was one side that did and the other side didn't. But what you said about the bounces that went their way, that's why when it was 4th and 1 at their own 30-yard line, I was like, they probably should go for this, because I don't know if they're going to be able to get the ball back, because last year it was always the defense that was put in those precarious situations when the offense couldn't close it out and the defense had their backs against the wall. And unfortunately, consistently, they would give up game-winning field goal drives or game-winning touchdown drives. And that's what the expectation was. And of course, not just once, but twice, the ball literally bounced their way and into the arms of a Bengals defensive back, getting the interceptions. Like you said, that just didn't happen last year. And all that mattered was just finding a way to win ugly amid the imperfections that we knew were going to happen. And that's what happened.
And obviously the Cleveland kicking struggles was a big part. I mean, there was 4 points left off the board there. There was a safety opportunity that Joe Burrow, we could look back at that and say, man, that that may have got him into the postseason should they get there. Just kind of leaping out of the end zone and diving forward at their own one. I want to say this, and then I want to talk about that drive in just a second. I want to say this. There are a lot of people who probably will sit here and say the kicking mistakes, the turnovers, that the lucky bounces, the Bengals didn't deserve this win, and that sort of thing. But when you also look at the flip side of that argument, what was it, 7 yards of total offense in the second half by the Bengals offense? When does that ever happen with this crew of stars? Joe Burrow with arguably, if not definitely, his worst game as a pro. I mean, he didn't turn it over a bunch or anything like that, but it was just lackluster at best. So you can also say, when does this ever happen to this crew of stars? And Cleveland was fortunate that the Bengals didn't take those interceptions and make this kind of a runaway game, that sort of thing as well. So there are two sides to this argument here, but I want to go back to that drive, and this is where I think it really encapsulated this. I tweeted this out, but I think that might have been the worst offensive drive I think I've ever seen a team have, and I'm talking about that safety. It was 3 plays, 3 sacks, almost a safety. You lose 19, 20 yards, and you're back at your own 1. I mean, that was just pitiful. And there are a lot of people you can blame. The offensive line, Burrow maybe not being as decisive as he is in October, November, December. But you fault play calling. I mean, you can fault a lot of people on all that stuff. That just really encapsulated, especially the second half offense, but really the offense's day. And that to me was a staggering series of events that I couldn't even believe. Not only 3 plays and you lose yards, all this kind of stuff. You lose the yards, you get 3 sacks, and then you're at your own 1 or 1.5 or whatever it was. So it was a snowball, yet somehow Cincinnati still was able to get past that and make enough plays to get the win.
Let's talk about this because, again, in the first half, you saw a concerted effort to make sure that Cleveland's pass rush was not going to be an issue, and they knew the Browns, again, were going to match up one-on-one, which Jamar Chase, T. Higgins have safety help over the top, and that was going to make it tough for those guys. It always is tough for those guys against that secondary. I don't care if it's the Browns or not. They have talent on this roster, and a lot of it is in that secondary, especially with Denzel Ward. So they knew that was the plan. That's why Noah Fant played like half the game. He played even more than Mike Gesicki. There are a lot of true 12 personnel looks.
12 personnel,
yep. Burrow not only under center, but in the pistol, and some of those design plays to make sure that the ball got out of his hands quickly. It's hard to go empty sometimes against that team, especially when you want to maximize protection with Burrow. And then in the second half, the Bengals started pressing a little bit because at that point, the defense was reeling and the game was close. And I think the Bengals started to abandon the run a little bit. The run had kind of fallen off at that point. I think Cleveland's defensive line was starting to feel itself. They were closing on some of those gaps. Chase Brown ended up not with a really good day after I think he had like 30 yards and 7 carries and a touchdown in the first drive alone. He ended up with like 41 yards in total. So the lack of a consistent run game throughout the game continues to hinder this team offensively. But the Bengals could not win against man coverage in this game, especially in the second half. Like, how many times did you see, Chase and Burrow not on the same page, whether it was Burrow not looking Chase's way when he was wide open on an over route and he tried to target Mike Gesicki in double coverage. It was on multiple deep routes where, the ball was just inaccurate, but he wasn't reading the leverage of the coverage properly. Just consistent. Like, if you hold T. Higgins and Jamar Chase like 4 receptions for 40-something yards, odds are you're going to win. And that's why the Bengals offense only mustered 16 points. It's no wonder why the offense ended up having a bad day in terms of point total and everything like that, because the stars of this team just didn't play well. And that's unfortunately been a consistent theme going up against the Browns. It hasn't always been that way. They've had some success here and there, but definitely not in that stadium, in that environment when everyone's juiced. It's week 1 and everything like that. That was a fear of this game, and it was lucky, and they're fortunate that they came out the gate firing, because if the game was just like it was in the second half when Cleveland was locking down in man coverage and they were getting the Bengals into these true pass sets, what happened on that drive when there was 3 sacks, right? Orlando Brown Jr. was playing well against Myles Garrett up until then, right? It was just like the Super Bowl with Aaron Donald. Like, you can only hold that guy back for so long before he starts doing Myles Garrett type things. And Orlando Brown Jr. still a fine left tackle, but Myles Garrett is going to get his. And that's exactly what happened when the Bengals were put in those spots where they had to just drop back and try to beat that secondary, try to beat that pass rush. Sometimes the talent of the Browns defense, it wins out.
I know there's criticism about the play calling, and we could talk about that a little bit, I guess, if you would like. But I did like, again, that first drive, another drive where they scored a touchdown, that sort of thing. But, there were some clever wrinkles. You mentioned the 12 personnel, the pistol. You saw Cody Ford come in at fullback at one point, that sort of thing. Fun. Yeah, that was fun. So there were some clever things in there. I want to ask you this, though. Do you feel, because obviously the team, week 1, they script and study that first offensive drive like hell. We know that. And do you think that it was just, man, once they got off that script, it just completely derailed and it's just an early season struggle? Or do you think that it was the Browns, like you said, just having the Bengals under Zach Taylor have not matched up well against the Browns? They just haven't. So do you think it was a matchup issue? Do you think it was week 1 I don't know, whatever you want to call it, jitters or rust or all that kind of stuff, or some combination of all three.
I don't know, man. I think that obviously week one matters with this team. And I was thinking about this, like watching the Ravens and Bills, right? Like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen playing like it's week, 16 out there instead of week one.
Right.
And like those guys can just do whatever they want physically, and defenses have to be fearful of that. Defenses have to respect the Bengals' timing and just the smoothness of their operation, but sometimes that does take time to develop, regardless of how much you actually play in the preseason. And the thing about the Browns' defense is that it suffocates you. They have a pass rush that can close in on your pocket, and they have cornerbacks that can, match up in one-on-one man coverage, which for most teams in the NFL, if you try to do that against the Bengals, they will burn you, and they have burned you, and they will burn defenses like that if they try to do what the Browns do. The Browns are just one of the few defenses that can get away with that, and they can neutralize what the Bengals do best. So it is tough for this Bengals offense to have 4 quarters of consistent success against this Browns defense. But I will say it is still slightly concerning that you had a good plan in the first half and you just failed to adjust and you failed to adapt with what Cleveland was continuing to do in the second half, because regardless of how talented the Browns defense was, you just cannot have a total of 7 net yards in an entire half of football. It's inexcusable.
You just can't. It's not sustainable. And, there's just, it was just baffling really what was occurring and how things kind of snowballed against them towards the end of the game here. So, there are things to be concerned about, but again, the win is a win, and the Bengals are 1-0. We talked about this. It was kind of a must-win game this early in the season, and we set it up as that because not only is it a divisional game, a road game, they have this onus over them that they can't win in the first 2 weeks of the season. And then they, of course, they just haven't played well, and the narratives continue. So they've got a couple of games coming up here that are going to be tough. Minnesota, Detroit, that sort of thing, about a month, Green Bay, a couple weeks down the road. So they've got to get a lot of things figured out. But the win is a win. They're 1-0. I wanted, just before we kind of move on a little bit, I saw this comment that I thought was interesting. I got to find it again. It's from Steve Hall in our live Facebook chat. I don't think they get motivated until they have to fight to make the playoffs. Till then, they just show up for the game and then hope the other team gets scared of the stars. That may have been said a little tongue in cheek. I don't think they just show up and think they're going to win. That doesn't really, they're pros, and they're pros for a reason. But they're obviously, when their backs are against the wall, this team just plays a different brand of football in week 14, 15, 16 instead of week 1 and 2. That's undoubted. Do you buy into this at all? This opinion?
No, but I see where he's coming from. It's just like that's just kind of how the seasons have gone for them. I think like they just unfortunately ran into a lot of slow starts, and again, like I don't think that's a motivation type thing. I just think that they know when they have to turn it on, they turn it on, and that's just when they get the best version of Burrow. But I promise you, like they were heavily motivated to win this game. Like everyone and their mom knew about what the importance of getting a week 1 win for the first time in 4 years. So like that, I don't think motivation was necessarily an issue here. Again, I think this is just a matchup in a scenario that was always going to be tough, and it ended up being a lot tougher than people expected.
I agree, and I do want to say here's what was a maddening element of this game is the sequence of a lot of things, where the Bengals would get a turnover, then they wouldn't move the ball, then there was a punt in the end zone, right? And then they, it was just stuff like that where or they didn't move the ball again, punt in the end zone, and it was completely imbalanced. Now, I don't want to hammer on the special teams, because Rico did have one of the biggest plays of the game by pinning the Browns at the 1-yard line at the very end there, that basically said, you're not going to win this game with a punt like that. And you also had Evan McPherson come in and get critical points when you look at the other sideline struggles on the kicking side of things, you then say, hey, kudos to the special teams. So I want to point that out. But obviously the big stars of the game was the Bengals defense. And I think we were all uncertain about things. It didn't look great to start out, but man, here's what I saw. And I don't know if you agree with me or not. It wasn't perfect. There were still some times where they would miss tackles and they would, miss first tackle attempts, that sort of thing. Obviously, the pass rush ramped up towards the end of the game, which I thought was good to see. Trey Hendrickson made some plays, and aside from doing the fake cry, he was making some plays. And the one element that stuck out to me the most is that if they were going to make a mistake, or if the Browns were going to make a play, or if the Bengals made a play, they were flying to the ball. They were moving fast to the football, and that was refreshing to see. They didn't it felt like at times last year maybe they were a little on their heels and they weren't sure, and I think that was kind of the criticism with Lou Anarumo, is maybe they were overthinking and that sort of thing. It felt like even if there was a play made on them, they were going hard to the ball, and they were going fast to the football. And that paid dividends on those interceptions that were made by DJ Turner and Jordan Battle, respectively, because they were right there and they didn't give up on the play or any, they kept the eye on the ball and made kind of miraculous interceptions there. So to me, that was the most encouraging part of the defense, is just them kind of flying around. And if they're going to make a mistake, they're making it at 120 miles an hour.
I agree. I think the angles were really good. I think the tackling was good, and that just wasn't something that you got a lot of exposure to, not only in training camp but also the preseason, when very clearly, like, that just wasn't the final form of the defense, what they're going to do. Logan Wilson looked really fast. I'm glad that he wasn't concussed too bad, because they only missed about like 12 snaps or here and there. I thought that Jordan Battle played really well as well. Kind of came downhill, took on blocks with aggression. I thought, for the most part, the defensive line holding up to blocks was a lot better than last year. TJ Sladen obviously made a big impact just holding up to double teams. He was depleted once, I think, on like a 3rd and short, and that's why they went up for it on 4th down. So he kind of recovered after that, and I think he even got a couple of pass rushing wins. BJ Hill also got some pass rushing wins. Trey Hendrickson played like 75% of the snaps, more than Al Golden expected, and won like on 40% of his pass rushes. So
silly.
Clearly didn't need training camp there, but no, it was discouraging in the first half, because you saw that they were playing a lot of man, but over the middle of the field there were still soft spots in their zones that I think Flacco was kind of identifying, and the middle of the field was kind of gaping open at some point. So you still have some concerns about the linebackers kind of be on the same page and dropping back into their coverages and their zones. Cam Taylor-Britt, obviously we need to talk about him. I think when you have a clear, I don't want to say liability, but when you have someone playing like that, and it's very easy for offenses to target on him, kind of makes the whole unit look a lot worse. And I think that was kind of a symptom of that. But it was encouraging to see the pass rush kind of come alive at the end of the game, because you couldn't let Joe Flacco just sit back there and clean pockets for 4 quarters, because at this point he's 40 years old. He's not going to make plays with his legs or anything like that. But if you give him time, he's still got the arm to make accurate touch passes all across the field. So it was good that they eventually got to that point, because if they weren't, it was going to be an even longer day for them.
And I think that was what the Browns wanted to do, is try and run the ball, which the Bengals clamped down pretty well on that overall in the game. But they wanted to run the ball and then exploit those kind of shorter intermediate routes across the middle of the field, not have Flacco, do 7-step drops all the time and have Trey Hendrickson bearing down on him, but not necessarily also getting the ball out super quick, but identifying those soft spots in coverage and that sort of thing. And you mentioned this here, of course, Mr. Whisper, Mr. Generosity. Thank you very much. That avatar looks like almost like an orange-suited Dick Tracy, if you remember that old cartoon character there. Rough game to watch, but the W matters most. Left side of the line may not be as solid as we thought. Again, it's Myles Garrett, week 1. It's tough, but I do agree. I mean, obviously there were some issues there later in the game. Defense showed improvement. Cam Taylor-Britt is still shaky. And Shamar Stewart made some plays. He had his mitts on the ball twice. One was negated by penalty. There's a great clip I think it was put out by Bengals and Brews on X, that shows him just absolutely tossing DeJuan Jones, a large human being, aside. And he just was, if you're the Browns offense, I would probably call Shamar Stewart in this game irritating. He was just
Yeah.
irritating. He was just there. He was just bugging you. And so for a guy that missed a substantial amount of practices and in his first NFL game did not show up on the stat sheet, but I think you had to like what you saw from him in this first game as well.
I agree. I think again, like the thing that you could count on Stewart now is to just disrupt, and that was the whole calling card for him. Like there was one play when I think I don't know if it was Jerome Ford or Sampson, but he kind of like tripped at the line of scrimmage, and it was like no game. But it would look like something that you saw the Bengals offensive line deal with a lot over recent years, and it was like he just crossed the face of two blockers, including I think David Njoku, instantly. And it's a tough block for like the edge to make there, but he got into the middle of the offensive line. He displaced guys, and it forced the running back to make a split-second decision. Even if no one else on the defensive line was really winning at that moment, it forced the running back to make that decision. He lost his balance and ended up being a 0-yard gain and everything like that. But that is an X factor that the Bengals defensive line just hasn't had. They've had guys that can hold their spot, that can maintain their gap, but someone who's like a wild card that other offensive lines have to be quick on the snap, have to make sure that they don't get their faces crossed like that. Like that is a potentially game-changing type force. And this is just the beginning, obviously. He needs to, again, like develop a lot more consistency, but the timing of, if he can time the snap that quickly and display the amount of force that he has and get under guys' pads, like he can be that disruptor on a weekly basis. And it's just about making sure that you kind of stack that all on top of knowing where to place your hands and all that stuff that will come in time. But it was really encouraging to see him make some of those type of splash plays that, again, don't always show up in the box score.
So there, yeah, I mean, and Mike here says, you know, Osai, he had some disruptive moments as well. So that was good to see. You had just like you said, BJ Hill played pretty well, I thought. Slayton had some pretty good moments as well. And again, when you're looking at the Browns, what was it, in the 40s for their team rushing yards, right? Yep. So when you're looking at that, I mean, it's funny because you say, if you're the Browns holding that Bengals trio of offensive stars to the statistical line that you did, you should have won the game. On the flip side, when you look at what the Browns did offensively, you know, they were -2 in the turnover margin. They had minimal rushing yards. You forced Joe Flacco to throw 44 times, I think. I mean, these are things that then also play in your favor there. There are some issues, and I think, you know, some people have talked about it. Cam Taylor-Britt, you also mentioned it. This was supposed to be kind of the year under Golden that he kind of had this renaissance. It's one game. I get it. One game. But a little worrisome in this one game as well. And that's something to look at. I don't know. They've got a game next week against the Jags. You've got Travis Hunter kind of playing both sides, and you know, you've got Brian Thomas Jr. and all kinds of players there too. So this is going to be another good test for him, but he needs to start turning the corner because he was turned around a couple times, a step or two behind on a couple of routes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that describes it perfectly. I think he was just a step too slow, and you know, like there was multiple times where he was trying to do some trail coverage and off coverage, and you're supposed to be kind of closer to the hip pocket, and he was just a step behind, and it's like that's wide open in the NFL. That's why an 18-year-old veteran and Joe Flacco is going to find you and take advantage of you like that. So it is tough when you have a cornerback who's just not on his game that day. It just makes the entire rest of the defense's life a lot harder. I did think it was interesting the way that DJ Turner played a little bit more than half the game, and Josh Newton played about half the game. Turner was mainly in man coverage, and Newton was he was on the field at times when Turner wasn't. And I don't know if that was specifically for this matchup where they wanted Newton, maybe his physicality against the run, but it is interesting how, you know, none of the starting four cornerbacks had any injury concerns, but all four of them played like significantly. So I don't know if that's preparing for maybe someone has to play for Cam Taylor-Britt if he continues to not impress. Obviously, he was benched twice last year, but that was a completely different defensive coordinator, coaching staff, and everything like that. So it's just something to keep an eye on because, like the leash with him, unfortunately, is just not very long. There is still optimism that he gets it right, but there's been precedent about this before about him just underwhelming when he needs to perform. And I think Al Golden said like he was the first guy that came to his office and took accountability and everything like that, and that's kind of on par with what he did last year, but he just can't have these performances stack. And I think they're preparing Josh Newton to play significantly more if he has to, in case Taylor Britt continues to underwhelm.
Yeah, it's something to monitor. And I don't know, I know some people are still talking about maybe a defensive back addition to the Bengals, and I know there's a couple veterans still sitting out there. Maybe that's something they look at again a week or two down the road. But nevertheless, I mean, I think just to kind of wrap a bow a little bit on the defense situation here, I mean, I think this is about as good as you would have hoped that they would have performed, especially with how poorly the offense played for the better part of 2 quarters. I mean, they just consistently got put in bad positions, and they stepped up. They made 2 turnovers. They had a couple of sacks and did other things just well. And I think the speed and the intensity, I think, with which they played, that's what impressed me the most.
Yeah, thank you, Maisha, in the chat, saying that DJ Turner told Kelsey Conway that they told him they might rotate him in. That makes sense. Obviously, he was coming off of a season and injury. So was Dax Hill, and he ended up playing like the second most snaps on the entire defense. And he wasn't just in the slot; he was on the boundary, he was in the box. He's completely unleashed. He's freed, and he looks great. So that was really, really promising to see. And my last thought on this: I know people have kind of commented on the interceptions being way more luck than skill, if you want to go that route, but I will say that the very first thing that Al Golden said up after being hired in his vision for the defense, like he's got an acronym labeled BEST, and B stands for ball disruption. The number one job for his defense is to get the ball back to the quarterback, get the ball back to the offense. Turnovers have been an emphasis for this defense for 8 months. It's been all they've been hearing about. It's what they've been practicing. And I think it really got into the message because Jordan Battle and DJ Turner do not make those extremely instinctual plays, split-second reactions, and obviously catching the ball without being in the right position to do so. And I think just the constant reinforcement that's coaching at the end of the day. Like, obviously, the players have to make the play, but this mindset of being just turnover hungry, it's what the defense has to be because they're very rarely going to hold teams to just 16 points. So they need to be opportunistic. They need to be what the 2005 Bengals were when they forced like 40 turnovers that year, right? So this was a good start and a good sign that messaging from Golden, the very first day that he came into the building, at the very least, it's gotten through. So good job by the players, but obviously I think Golden deserves credit for really emphasizing the importance of turnovers.
I agree. And it also points to the athleticism of who they have on that side of the ball. I mean, Turner is one of the most, athletic profile wise, one of the most athletic guys on the team. And just that ability to, for those 2 balls to be intercepted and really not, and how close they were to hitting the ground. And on both of them, there wasn't really even a doubt that they scooped it and caught it. Yep. And it wasn't like, ooh, did that bounce into his arms? It was like 2 clean catches. And so kudos to both those guys for making big plays when the Bengals sorely needed it. And the defense is kind of the hero this week, which is not something I think we all expected to say after this one, despite the results. So good on Al Golden, good on his unit. Good job by them. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. So go check that out through your favorite audio streamer. You got to spell it kind of a funky way, BLEAV. And we are brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So hopefully you won some money with them. I don't know. Maybe you lost money because the line was 5.5. I don't know. Maybe you lost some money yesterday. Hopefully you didn't. And of course, FOCO, the fans only company. And go check out their exclusive line of Bengals merchandise at foco.com. And the links to both are in our show descriptions. So I think now, John, a big question emerges based on this win. It's a 1-point win. You're like, oh, just get the win. Oh, it's, get out of there and get the win. Of course. But with all of these questions, are you encouraged, discouraged about the Bengals' outlook? Both? What are you feeling?
So I think you have to lean encouraged just because we've seen this charade from the offense before, and they're still in a really good spot health-wise. We could talk a little bit about that in the coming minutes here about something. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are going to get theirs. They're not going to be held to 5 receptions combined every single week. Burrow, we know his clock kind of finds its footing after the first couple weeks of the season. We know that this matchup specifically has given this team problems. And when you combine that with the early season struggles, it just creates what we saw out there. So offensively, I'm not in a position to be like, this is a concern, because we've just seen this so many times before. It is encouraging to see the defense and all the keys instituted this offseason really come to fruition so early. Obviously, it wasn't perfect out there. They were reeling for the entire first half, and that wasn't great to see coming out of the gate. But the other team is fired up too in week 1. And the Browns still have athletes that can take advantage of Bengals players that, if they're not on their game, it's why you saw what you saw. So definitely more encouraging than discouraging. Obviously, this was very likely going to be a loss if the Browns kicker just does his job. But I think the things that didn't go right aren't necessarily always going to be this bad, because, again, this is just par for the course for them.
Yeah, I am in agreement with you. I feel like coming out of that game, I don't want to say I was as drastic as Mr. Nick Lachey and what he put out on X yesterday.
What did he say?
But he basically said, I don't know, something to the effect of, you can't be happy with this if this is how the rest of the season, one of those just in the moment emotional things. And I leaned a little that way, not fully what he said, but I leaned a little that way, just saying, man, this just should have been a much different game. Obviously they won, so that's good, all that kind of stuff. But this is why this show is fun 24 to 28 hours later, because you get time to process some things a little bit further. And I am encouraged, because if we're sitting here again, John, and this was a, 35-31 win, if this was a situation like we saw last night with the Bills and the Ravens, we're singing a different tune. And the big concern point, again, it's Joe Flacco and the Browns who are finding themselves on offense. But like you said, they've got players. If it was, again, the same storyline of the defense and that question mark just remains, it would have been easy to be like, oh, gosh, this is just going to be another one of those types of years, just like last year type of thing. But that unit that it has been explosive and dependable, that being the offense, will find itself. Will it be October? Will it be next week? Will it be November? I don't know, but they are too good. Their star players are too good to let this be an issue for very long. I know we're going to do a show later this week about Jaguars preview and all that kind of stuff. I do not envy the position of the Jaguars defense this coming week, because we had another Joe Burrow, moment on the sideline towards the end of the game, like we saw last year against the Titans. So I have faith that the Bengals offense will regroup and be who they have always been, maybe even as soon as next week, as opposed to now having to feed into further doubts about the defense, which is not the case, at least after one game. And again, it's week 1, weirder things happen. Al Golden's unit next week could have hiccups or, more problems, and we're talking about a different thing. But for right now, I am definitely more encouraged than discouraged. Would I have rather have seen a more dominant win? Of course. Would I have rather not seen the offense do what they did or didn't do in the last 2 quarters? Of course. But they got to win. That narrative is spun a little bit. And then now you have this group of stars that's going to be probably pretty pissed off going into this week about how they played this week.
You all know me. I'm a very analytical person. I'm a very pragmatic person. I don't like to dive into emotion in that part of the game too often. But I will say it should mean something to see a game go your way after so many times last year it didn't. And I think that does do something in terms of, like, we've done this before, we can do it again. And that belief just wasn't necessarily there until it was too late. Like you said, if it takes the offense until November to get them to find their footing, then we have a significant problem. But the fact that they were just able to make enough plays to win, that should count for something. And I think that does resonate in the locker room, knowing that the players that they're paying $600 million for, they're gonna find their footing eventually, and probably pretty soon.
Yeah. I do want to say this too, and this is kind of a micro subject under this encouraged or discouraged. I know Myles Garrett started to have his way towards the end of the game. Were you, and because the offensive line, the Bengals offensive line was kind of having its way early, I felt like. And then things kind of started to fall apart, maybe some halftime adjustments by Cleveland, that sort of thing. And obviously just tough, those contested catches weren't being come down with by the Bengals receivers, or Burrow missed a read or two, that sort of thing. I was kind of encouraged. Now we're going to talk about something in just a second that is discouraging in a way. So, but I was kind of encouraged with what I saw with the Bengals offensive line throughout a good portion of this game.
I agree. Again, I think I had a good plan to start to make sure that they weren't in precarious situations, but unfortunately, as the run game deteriorated, you get behind the chains, you allow the pass rush to kind of tee off on you a little bit. And that was kind of the case as the game went on. It's just impossible to shut out number 95 for 4 quarters, but they did their damnedest to do so. And again, like I didn't come away feeling discouraged by any single offensive lineman. And especially, I mean, not just Dalton Reisner, like obviously, like Noah Fant too. Like the fact that like your 2 newest signings in offense made such an impact in week 1 when they barely had any time to really get acclimated. But Reisner just coming in 36 snaps and just staying up keeping his head above water, playing next to guys he's never played before. He had only 1 padded practice before this, and he just came in off the bench. It was definitely encouraging to see. So yes, there were rough moments at the end of the game with the offensive line, but that's going to happen when you face really elite athletes, especially Myles Garrett. So I wasn't discouraged overall by the offensive line.
Well, you teased it here. Dalton Reisner did come in with for Lucas Patrick, as Patrick had a calf injury in this game. Zach Taylor on Monday said Lucas Patrick is going to be out a couple of weeks, and Dalton Reisner will be taking over the right guard spot. And my Lord, not that we ever wish any kind of injury on anyone, but this is where signing Reisner when you did, if not, should have been way earlier. This is where not waiting a week or two in the season helps a bunch. So Dalton Reisner, I think he had an 80 pass blocking score per PFF in this game. So he stood out pretty well. And so Patrick did okay, but his overall score was overall PFF score wasn't great. But Reisner now in, I think that may provide at least a little bit of a boost in some ways. Obviously, the Bengals liked what they saw out of Patrick throughout summer, but now, at least for the next couple of weeks, Reisner is your right guard for the Cincinnati Bengals.
It does suck for Patrick. I mean, he's been dealing with that calf since like training camp, and it caused him to miss some practice early on. And I think it's just something that, like Joe Burrow, right? Like you just have to continue to monitor it for weeks on end. But Patrick had I think officially a 79.7 pass blocking grade. He had 6 opportunities, and he was fine. Like I think he was playing all right before he got hurt. Reisner obviously came in and played a lot more, so surrounded a pressure in a true pass set. So his pass blocking area was like 64.8, which again,
okay, I messed up on that.
Yeah. No. Like they roll out initial grades like right after the game ends, and then they go back and look at it again. So no, so Zach Taylor didn't like officially say that Reisner is going to start. I think he said we're going to make some decisions there, but like you just got to read between the lines here. Both Reisner, Cody Ford, not both, all 3, Reisner, Cody Ford, and Jalen Rivers were all active in this game. And Reisner was the guy that came in for Patrick. So he already came in an emergency situation. Now you saw what he did out there in an emergency situation. Ted Karras called it one of the most impressive aspects of a football performance he's ever seen before. Like obviously the positive impression has been made. He was already given that first chance. So it would be shocking if Reisner wasn't out there starting in week 2. And if he plays well in these next couple weeks, Patrick out, then you have to make a decision about, are you going to keep him in the starting lineup instead of going back to Patrick, who again is coming off of a calf injury. So it's not official just yet, but it would be shocking if they went in another direction after first going to him in the middle of the game and then seeing what he did in the actual game.
Yeah, but I did think there were, it's just, again, a matter of consistency along the offensive line. It was good early. It was good early when things were on script or they still were, stymieing Myles Garrett kind of earlier in the game. But once he got going, things just kind of ran amok a little bit. But I do think that this line with Reisner is something that should provide a lot of benefits going forward. What do you make? I know he's known more for his pass protection instead of run blocking, and then the Bengals struggled to run the ball, and that's being polite about it in the second half. What do you make of that element with him potentially stepping into the lineup? And I mean, are you going to see improvement here, even though he's kind of known a little bit more as a pass protector than run blocker?
Yeah, again, I thought both him and Mims, they were really standing out in that first drive, specifically with displacing guys and generating movement. There was even a play I think I called back for holding where they really opened up a hole for him. And as the game went on, it just became tougher and tougher to run against the Browns defensive line. So I was discouraged a little bit by that. And again, I don't think that's going to be his calling card necessarily, but no, I think he'll be fine. And the more reps that he gets, the better that he'll be working in sync with Mims and everything like that. It is really up to Mims to really take that step, and I think he was starting to take it. And I wasn't necessarily discouraged necessarily, but in terms of individual guys, but I am interested to see kind of how he develops in that area, because again, it's just never been his career-long strength.
We also had Geno Stone leave the game a little bit yesterday with an injury, so something else to monitor there in the secondary. But overall, again, John, aside from Patrick and the calf injury, the Bengals come out of this one pretty healthy, which is when they entered it, they were very healthy. So that's another plus and another piece of encouragement that one can definitely take from this game.
100%. I was concerning because of how well Logan Wilson, I think, was playing individually to see him leave the game with a concussion, but came back, appears to be fine. It was also really concerning the fact that Lucas Patrick was the backup center in this game because they didn't have Matt Lee active. And then when Patrick went out, it was like, okay, they only got one center left. And for a split second, it looked like Ted Karras was coming up a little bit shaky, but he's a tough SOB. I think he's only missed like 10 snaps in his Bengals career. It was like week 18 a couple years ago. So he's as durable as they come. And I think that's why they had confidence in that. But yeah, without Patrick next week, Matt Lee will 100,000% be active because they have no one else.
Yeah. And then Misha says, how did Tyson Anderson look? He did a little bit of everything. He was doing some things I think he had 4 total tackles. He did a little bit of everything, stepped in on defense here and there, and then was on special teams too. So, that's his role. Maybe mix in on defense here and there and then play special teams. So I thought he was fine. I don't think it was absolute standout like some of the others, but I thought it was okay.
Yeah, it was just 7 snaps, It's hard to really judge it that much.
Yeah. So what, just as we start closing up here, John, this show has flown by. What are you looking for this week and heading in? And we're going to preview this game again a little bit later this week. But what are you looking for just as we sit here on Monday, the day after a Bengals win? What are you looking for going into this week? What elements are you saying, hey, really shore this up? Or what players are you kind of saying, hey, this guy's popping into my mind right now as to someone to watch coming into this week?
Yeah, I really want to see how they continue building on the run game because, again, it was a really big focal point this offseason of just centering everything around Chase Brown. He was obviously the bell cow in this game, and it just didn't progress like it probably should have. And it's just so important in some of these games when if your defense is going to keep it competitive, you need to make sure that you churn out some clocks to give them some time off the field. And that just didn't happen on Sunday. So how they continue to tweak and work around the run game, now that what your starting offensive line is going to be with the clarity with Patrick, that you're going to have Reisner in there. He's going to get all the practice reps. He's obviously someone to watch for as well, just how much of a progression that he can take. Now he's going to get some actual practice time with the ones. It's really just about the offense right now because they need to respond really quickly and not, lay another egg, especially at home.
Yeah, I like the Reisner point because, again, this guy came here, a week and a half before the season, a week before the season. Yep. And then he gets thrown into the starting role, and presumed starter coming up this week. And so now when he gets, like you said, the bulk of the snaps and is really immersed more into the playbook, that sort of thing, I'm really interested in him. I am going to go a little bit of opposite, though, because I am really, really curious about if if this was a flash in the pan because of some of the things we mentioned about the Browns in terms of an overall performance, or if this is going to be a somewhat or wholly consistent type of performance by the defense. I'm curious to see if Shamar Stewart has earned more time on the field because of his disruptive plays last week. I'm curious to see if Trey Hendrickson and BJ Hill can continue to beat Father Time and, continue to make some plays. And I'm curious to see if the Bengals run defense will remain pretty stout against, there's some weapons on this Jacksonville team. I think a lot of people, obviously it's a road game for Jacksonville. And a lot of people think that the Bengals will and should be favored in this game, but I mean, they can put up points when they get things clicking right. So I'm kind of looking at the defense heading into this one. Just, is this a fluke or is this going to be something that they can kind of maintain throughout a good portion of the year?
I was going to look up officially what Travis Etienne did to poor Carolina. It was 143 yards on 16 carries. Somehow he didn't score a touchdown, but there were some gaping holes with Liam Cohen is now running that offense, and that's a coordinator that the Bengals haven't really played that much. Obviously they didn't play Tampa very often when he was the offensive coordinator there. So it's a new offense that the Bengals have to go up against. Travis Hunter, don't believe caught a pass. No, I'm sorry. No, he did. Sorry. I was looking at the rushing stats. Caught 6 passes for 33 yards. He was mainly in the slot, I want to say. So that's just kind of what his usage has been. But again, that's a big unknown as well. So totally different offense, innovative play caller. Definitely some concern there.
And will Cam Taylor-Britt make have a bounce back game? That's gonna be a need this week for sure. But this has been the aftermath, where we talk about a Bengals game a day, sometimes 2 days, but most of the time the day after a Bengals game. Hey, we're not trying to be Debbie Downers here. It's a win. The Bengals won 17-16. They're in the win column. They are tied atop the AFC North with, yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who edged one out against the Jets. Epic collapse by the Baltimore Ravens last night against the Buffalo Bills, so that puts them at 0-1, but we'll see how they rebound as well. But the Bengals are atop the AFC North right now with the Steelers at 1-0. They have a good opportunity in front. I don't like saying winnable, but they have a good opportunity in front of them this week. They just need to obviously play much, much better on offense and keep some form of consistency on defense. Anything else, John, before we head out the door? This episode just screamed by. This is at least for me.
I mean, that's how we roll, right? 52 minutes in the blink of an eye. But I guess for the people who didn't like the all-orange uniform combo that was rolled out there week 1 last year, that will not be the case Sunday. The Bengals are going to go with their rarest uniform combo, the white and orange pants with the orange jersey. The last time and the only time that they've ever worn that was against the Jaguars in 2021. You can't zero me Joe Burrow moment. Evan McPherson's second game winner and 4th career game. Didn't squander the inaugural Ring of Honor night. So Bengals clearly trying to recreate some 2021 magic, because that was also the last time that they were 1-0.
You're not going to this one, are you?
I'm not.
No, you're not. Okay. Well, everybody, I hope you had a great weekend and enjoyed the win, however nerve-wracking it may have been for all of you. We appreciate you tuning in to the Orange and Black Insiders episode of The Aftermath. You can get our show and some great other Bengals podcasts on the Believe in Cincy, and that's BLEAV in CINCY Bengals podcast channel. So go check that out. We'll be bringing you a couple episodes a week on this show, and some other great shows. We'll be bringing you shows as well throughout the week to give you your Bengals fix. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Bengals OBI or the Orange and Black Insider. Just check us out there. Keep it to A to Z Sports, where this guy is killing it over there with great Bengals coverage, as well as CincyJungle.com for all your Bengals podcasts, analysis, film review, news, all kinds of different stuff. Keep it to both of those websites. And of course, a big thanks to our sponsors of the program, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go get your bets in. Do the weekly fantasy football thing, get your parlays, all that good stuff at FanDuel.com. and go get your exclusive Bengals merch at foco.com, the fans only company. Thanks, everybody. Take care. We will be back later this week with more on the Orange and Black Insider.